Okay, so thanks everyone for being here today at the first, I believe, PyData Los Angeles. So first thing to note is that, yeah, I'm Bryan Vandeven. I'm not Luke Canavan, who was originally scheduled to give that talk. I'm going to be giving a very similar talk. As it happens, I'm also the project lead for Bokeh, and so I'm really most good at maybe doing status updates for Bokeh. And so I'm going to put a little bit of that in this talk as well because it's very timely. We're actually going to be releasing a 1.0 release of Bokeh this week. So that's exciting. So we have a little bit of a status update, and then also talk about Bokeh and how it can be used to build sort of data applications and dashboards, and give some examples of that as well. So first off, who's familiar with Bokeh? Show of hands. Or who's not familiar with Bokeh? Okay, a good number of people. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly go through sort of what Bokeh is about. I like to give this for recorded videos anyway, so that way if there's viewers later, they can make sure to have the full picture. So just to quickly introduce Bokeh, Bokeh is a tool for interactive visualizations. It allows you to add all kinds of interactive controls, widgets, dynamic sort of aspects on a web page to interact with PyData tools for visualization. It supports all kinds of versatile and high-level graphics. We want to make it possible to create very novel graphics, but certainly any kind of graphic you need to be able to create. Hopefully you can do it with Bokeh. We also want to be able to handle streaming data, sort of large data, any kind of dynamic updating data. If you've got data coming in over some AJAX REST API, or you've got data that you're streaming in from some market source or some sensor, we want to be able to handle cases like that as well. So Bokeh has facilities for that. All of this is for the browser, right? So this generates HTML pages that are reactive, that have these visualizations in them, and that's with or without the Bokeh server. So there's an optional Bokeh server component that's part of Bokeh that we'll talk about in a bit, that really allows you to connect all of the actual PyData tools, OpenCV, Pandas, NumPy, all of these things to these visualizations very easily, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And also, of course, it works in the Jupyter Notebook, right? So everyone, I imagine, is using the Jupyter Notebook for all kinds of exploratory data analysis, and so Bokeh works really well inside Jupyter Notebooks. And the last thing, of course, is that there's no JavaScript that you have to sort of muck with. Repeat that, no JavaScript. And that's not by way of trying to language shame. I'm just trying to say that all of us probably are productive in Python. That's why we're here at PyData, or we're productive in R and Julia. And so Bokeh is really about creating simple, to write apps for data science. So we've got all kinds of different domains where you might want to create things that allow you to slice and dice or look into data, cross-filter data. We might want to create report type things. We have a live streaming spectrogram example. Maybe we're running scikit-learn. All of these things, we want to create simple to write data apps. And so that's just, when I say no JavaScript, it's more about making it so that you can concentrate on your work. You're already productive, in Python, in R, and you're productive with all these Python tools. So let's let you stay in that productive area and still make these powerful visualizations. So there's mostly written in Python. If you want to do some customizations, you can do customizations. But to get a simple Bokeh page or Bokeh application running, there's little or no HTML or CSS coding required to do that. And also, the scripts that you write themselves are very simple. And we'll see some examples in a bit. They look just like regular Python scripts. There's not some big framework that you have to plug in, or classes that you have to subclass, or you can use all the organizational tools in Python to organize your Bokeh application if you want to. But you can also just write simple scripts, and we'll see some examples of that. Bokeh is useful for a wide variety of use cases. People use it in the notebook for exploratory data analysis, and especially in conjunction with Pandas. There are folks that are starting to build higher level tools on top of Bokeh, things called HoloViews. HoloViews is one example, together with Data Shader. These are even higher level APIs that are really great for exploratory data analysis, and maybe I can link to some of those in a bit. The Bokeh server, as I mentioned, its main use case is to automatically mirror state from Python to JavaScript. We'll talk about how Bokeh is actually put together, some concepts in a second. But the Bokeh server lets you synchronize things between Python and JavaScript very easily. So if I make a change in Python, if I update some data, my plot or my graph can update. If a user makes a selection on the plot, I can transmit that information back to Python and react to it, do other kinds of computations or other kinds of analysis on that information. And in general, we're trying to let people connect the full PyData stack, right, to these interactive web apps as easily as possible, as frictionless as possible. So we've got NumPy, we've got SciPy, we've got Pandas, we've got scikit-learn, skimage, all these tools that are really fantastic. How do we sort of plug those into interactive visualizations without having to write a huge web app ourselves? So people have done a lot of interesting things with Bokeh. As I mentioned, we're having a release here pretty soon, so it's put me in a little bit of a reflective mood. So I sort of went through Twitter and found some examples of people have done cool things with Bokeh. We can see the Dask dashboard. We'll see that in a bit more detailed. People are doing sort of geographic and map type explorations. There's some folks doing sports analyses. There's some astronomers who've been using Bokeh a lot to do some really cool analyses on astronomical data and other hard sciences folks. And there's people that have used Bokeh in a wide variety of venues. There's obviously finance folks that are using Bokeh. I know some people in the pharmaceutical industry are using Bokeh. So a lot of different applications and use cases for Bokeh. If I can pick on one, this one just is the most recent one I've seen. This is Kepler-Go/light curve, and this is an example that was created again by one of those astronomers. So they've got astronomical data coming in, typically a lot of data. So they want to be able to drill down and sort of see all kinds of different aspects of data. And so Bokeh allows them the tools to be able to do that, right? We can have all kinds of interactions, panning and zooming, selections, and then we can link that to other plots. And whenever these kind of events happen, we can use the Bokeh server to respond to those events and update accordingly. And so that's been a very useful thing for them to create. Okay. So with that brief introduction, I want to talk a little bit about Bokeh today. This is the status update portion. Where Bokeh is today, where it's headed, a few words about that, and then we'll get into sort of the meat of the presentation in a bit. Okay, so just as a quick reflection, again, I'm in a very nostalgic mood. Just to set the stage, this is circa June 2014, probably the first sort of real release of Bokeh, maybe 0.5. You can see we had about 5,000 downloads a month, and it's pretty astounding to me and humbling actually to see sort of where we've come in those intervening years, right? So now, if you combine Conda and PyPy downloads, it's well over 500,000 installs per month, and that still blows me away. So there's a lot of people using Bokeh for a lot of interesting cases, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to build this. But all of that's possible not because of my work, but because of an entire team of people who've contributed to Bokeh over the years, and there's been just really fantastic people who've worked on Bokeh. Havoc Pennington, one of the original GNOME GTK developers, wrote the second generation Bokeh server. The reason it's so fantastic is because he's fantastic. Julia Signal just added long-time issue patches with holes, which is going to help support contour plots and some GIS use cases. Just added that in for 1.0. Philip and Jean-Luc are the HoloViews devs. They've done some great work to add new features that support HoloViews. Mateus is one of our stalwart sort of front-end JavaScript developers. Of course, the inimitable Sarah Bird has done a huge amount of work to make Bokeh look really good, better than sort of designed by engineers look. And so a lot of that's as a result of her fantastic work. So a lot of people have worked, but also a lot of other people. We just hit 322 contributors on GitHub. I think this will be the final number before our 1.0 release, and that's, again, very humbling and very amazing. Really grateful for all those people. I'd like to call out a few special thanks to Karl Vanderplas, Eugene Pakamov, and Anthony Dokoliagos, who we just recently recognized at the NumFOCUS Summit as sort of new contributors. And so they've done a lot of really great work. We're starting to get to the point where we get new contributors to Bokeh who are doing more than just sort of a drive-by PR. They submit 5 or 6 PRs, and they're a lot more in depth. And so I really encourage anyone who's interested in getting involved in Bokeh to come talk to us. We'd love to have new contributors. Great places to talk to us are places like the mailing list, Stack Overflow, good for questions, or there's a Git or Dev channel, which is a really good place to come and talk to us as well. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to have a 1.0 release this week. It might be tomorrow. This travel's put a little bit of a kink in my schedule, so it might be Wednesday. We'll see what we do. But some of the new things that are coming in 1.0, as I mentioned, Julia added support for multi-polygons with holes. This is sort of a long time issue. It just took a while to get it done. But that's actually useful for things, again, like filled contour plots or some different GIS type plots. So that's actually really exciting to get that in. Several fixes to data table. That's one of the more complicated widgets we have to deal with, and it's had various issues. I will say one of the nice things is we've just put in a new infrastructure for integration and Selenium testing, and so we're actually able to maintain these, I think, a lot better going forward and prevent some of the kinds of regressions we've had in the last year or so. But anyway, there's a lot of fixes that are coming for data table, which is good. We also added a custom action, so if you want to add your own toolbar button that invokes a little custom JS snippet and to do whatever you want, it's very easy to do that now, to have your own toolbar button. We also added a new way to export and embed Bokeh. So, part of the motivation in making Bokeh easy to use without JavaScript was we made some functions that just return like a script tag that you can embed in a template. But as it turns out, some folks actually want a little bit more work to do on the JS side, and they would like just a pile of JSON, just the raw JSON that represents a Bokeh document. And so we now have a very simple JSON export that you can pass to one function on the JavaScript side to embed it in any div that you want. And so that's actually a very nice thing. So this was inspired by another talk. We saw someone had chosen another tool besides Bokeh, and they sort of explained what their rationale was, and they actually had front-end developers who wanted a simple function to embed this kind of JSON that they pulled off a REST API. And So now we can do that as well with Bokeh, and I think that's actually a very useful feature. Similar lines, we added a callback to the Ajax data source. So Ajax data source is a source that you can configure to look at some REST API to pull in data periodically. It's a pretty useful tool if you want to have a standalone page that doesn't rely on the Bokeh server, but that can still sort of update dynamically. But until now, it's needed to have the REST API supply data in a very specific format. But now, there's a callback that you can use to adapt any kind of return that you get from that REST API into the Bokeh format. And so I think this makes the Ajax data source much, much more generally useful. We should have done it a long time ago. Sometimes things just take a while, but I'm happy that that's gone in now as well. Another long-time feature that has been asked for that we just now finally got around to was a parameterizable scatter type. So right now, if you're plotting, say, the iris flowers data, you might have to plot circles for the one species and squares and triangles for the two other species, and you have to make separate calls to do that. But now you can actually just call scatter, and you can use a marker map to mark that categorical species type to squares or circles. And so I think this opens up a different kind of usage that I think will be really useful. Now that we have these notions of mappers and transforms in Bokeh, this is why this made more sense to do now than it did earlier. But we finally got around to it, and so I'm happy that's gone in as well. We also changed the way that the web drivers are allocated for PNG and SVG static exports. Previously, we always spun up a new web driver for every export. It was kind of slow. You could create your own web driver to make that faster and pass it in by hand, but now it just does that by default. So PNG SVG export should be quite a bit faster by default. And also import times. We spent a little bit of time optimizing for import time. So Bokeh is a pretty big, sophisticated library where I think we're getting down to about as low an import time as we can. A lot of it's taken up by NumPy or Pandas if you're using it. But there might be a little bit more time. But certainly it's able to make some strides for this latest release, and so I'm happy for that as well. So that's a lot that's gone into 1.0. Obviously, leading up to that, there's a lot of other features that are already in Bokeh. Of course, you can see the docs and the user guide and the examples to sort of get a feel for those things. OK, so what about some basic principles of Bokeh that we can use to build sort of data applications or dashboards, as the talk was titled? So first off, just to mention how Bokeh works sort of at a very high bird's eye view, Bokeh has Python objects as an API in Python that lets you create a pile of objects, things like plots and data sources, axes, tools, ranges, all kinds of objects, custom JS callbacks. All of those exist in this, these Python objects, and those can get turned into a JSON format. And then that pile of JSON is consumed by a JavaScript library called Bokeh.js. And that JavaScript library, Bokeh.js, reconstitutes that JSON into an identical set of objects on the JavaScript side, and then it uses those objects to actually render Canvas, SVG output, WebGL output in some cases. And so that's a really flexible architecture. You can sort of see this in action. If you use the low-level Bokeh.models API, you can create these kind of objects like a circle glyph, and then you can sort of call to JSON, and you can see, yeah, it's got just all the stuff that you would expect, sort of the attributes, the properties of this circle glyph. And so the Bokeh.models API is this API that's mirrored on both the JavaScript and the Python side. There's sort of an object in Python, matching an object in JavaScript, and JSON that goes between them. So if I was Luke and Luke was giving this talk, he'd go on and talk more about Bokeh models. He really likes the Bokeh models, sort of the low-level building blocks API, because he wants to build things up from scratch. I like to work with sort of the higher-level Bokeh.plotting API, so I'm not going to talk too much more about Bokeh.models, just to mention that it's there, and that's what the other APIs are built on top of. But one consequence of having this architecture is that it's nice and fairly straightforward to make Bokeh bindings for other languages. So someone has actually done that, for instance, for R, Ryan Hafen, who's on the NumFOCUS steering committee for Bokeh, is created R Bokeh, right? And so it's just R code, an R API, that can generate that same pile of JSON, and as a result, it can generate Bokeh plots from R code, right? So if you want to use Bokeh from R, you can. There's also a Bokeh Scala project. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention lately that Mateus maintains, but I'd love to create as many language bindings for Bokeh as we can. I think Julia and Bokeh would be a great combination. There actually was a Julia binding for Bokeh several years ago, a very long time ago, and the person maintaining it just had to move on to other things, but I would love to get someone from the Julia community to help make Bokeh.jl, so you could use Bokeh with Julia. But any language, we could make MATLAB. I'll threaten to do MATLAB bindings for Bokeh. I won't do that. Someone else can do that if they want to. But if you want to check out RBokeh, you can go to GitHub. It's under Ryan Hafen's GitHub under the RBokeh project. OK, so another general idea for Bokeh is that we want to be able to map attributes sort of visual properties to data columns. So what do I mean by that? So one of the fundamental objects or models in Bokeh is this thing called a column data source. And the best way to think about it is just sort of as a cheap pandas data frame, right? It's a mapping of names to sequences of data. This could be arrays, they could be Python lists, they could be pandas series. Doesn't really matter. They all need to be the same length, just like in a data column or a data frame. But it's the same idea, right? So I create a column data source here from a plain dictionary. I've got a time, value, and color columns in my column data source that map to sequences. I can create a figure. And then when I call this glyph method circle, I can say that, hey, I want to map the x coordinates to the time, and I want to map the y coordinates to the value column, and I want to map the fill color to the color column. There's a lot of different attributes that you can map to data in this way, and then you can update the column data source in JavaScript callbacks, in Python callbacks, and Bokeh server applications, and that will cause the visualization to update accordingly. So these column data sources have a couple of other methods. One way we can update the data is just to set its .data attribute. So if I call source.data equals some new dictionary, that will update all the data for this plot, and all the glyphs will update. But there's also some other particular cases that are useful in Bokeh server applications. There's a streaming API. So if you have data coming in, new data continuously, it's inefficient to sort of update all the data every time. So you can sort of just send the marginal increments to your data using that stream. Or if you need to update in the middle of your data, so read-only access in the middle of a large data set, there's a .patch. Maybe a quick demonstration, actually. So I'll just show here's the OHLC demo. So this stands for open, high, low, close. So this is kind of like financial data. So you imagine sort of data coming in. You're showing these candlesticks for the data. It's computing a moving average of some sort. It's also computing these MACD indicators. This script actually is generating synthetic data for the visualizer to use. But that's all under 100 lines of Python, including the simulation. A lot of the code is actually for the simulation. But you can see it's reactive to these widgets. If I want to change the mean, and now we make a lot of money, and we can start seeing that our profits go way up, and I can make things a lot more volatile by increasing the standard deviation. If I want a different exponential average, I can do that, and you can see where it changed there in the middle. So that's I guess an example of this streaming API. And we could actually take a look at Bokeh. So in the GitHub repo, the examples directory is a great place to go look for example code. So if we look at examples app OHLC, if we go to main.py, this is the entire script. Right? So that's the entire script to get that interactive streaming web app is all of this code, and a good chunk of this code, again, is the actual simulation code there in the update step. So anyway, that's a quick example of the streaming API. So that is a useful thing. And the patch is similar. Again, patches, if you want to update just one or two items in the middle of a big array, it's inefficient to send the whole array. So patch lets you send just the new items very efficiently. OK. Another feature that's nice for Bokeh is styling. As we've seen, there's Python APIs for controlling things like visual appearance of all of the axes or the titles or fonts and line widths for grids and things like that. But you can also put this information in sort of a declarative YAML or JSON format and then load this as a theme. And that's actually really useful if you want to have a consistent look across several plots in a dashboard, for instance. You can just dump all of that inside this sort of Bokeh style sheet, if you will. And you can pretty much target any property on any Bokeh object, right? So here we've got attributes for axes. I want to set all of the the line colors for the major and minor ticks. I want to set the font size for the labels. I want to set the grid line color to null or whatever. So we can make our plots consistent very easily without having to write a lot of code by using these style sheets. Recently we've had some user contributed styles, and this is actually a great place for anyone who's interested in getting involved to plug in. You could create new styles, and we could talk about getting those added to Bokeh, but there's the Caliber, Monokai Dark, and Minimal Dark styles are some things that have gone in recently. Definitely, there's some improvements we'd like to make to the styling mechanism itself. Another great place for new contributors to get involved if you want to look at a project to get involved with. OK, styles. Another thing Bokeh can do is let you lay out different objects on the screen, right? So Bokeh has sort of a built-in layout capability that's basically on rows and columns, right? So here I'm using the layout function. I can give it a list which lists rows of things, and each excuse me, each row lists several objects, several columns. And so here you can see sort of a dashboard type layout. I've got my Bollinger plot returned on the top, and then I've got the slider, which actually returns a row with a bunch of widgets inside it, and then a plot. And then I've got this linked panning, which returns a row with 3 plots in it. I can set my sizing mode to stretch both, so that if I make my browser bigger or smaller, then the plots get bigger or smaller. So this is sort of an example of that. I will say, they can be responsive. I'll say that our current layout system, it has some problems and known issues. I think it's fair to say that we bit off a little bit more than we could chew. So there's actually some work ongoing now, a fairly large work in progress PR that really simplifies our layout system greatly and tries to sort of make it, one, much faster, but a lot simpler. We were relying on a constraint solver basically to do our layout, and it turns out that's kind of overkill, and it's also hard to manage. And so we're making something a little bit simpler, a lot faster, for especially if you want to put 60 or 100 plots on a page. The new layout system work better. It's just kind of a big PR and a big effort, so we didn't put it in for 1.0 because it was kind of a little too risky this late in the game. But we'll have a 1.0 release as soon as we can that has that sort of layout. But regardless of whether sort of Bokeh's built-in layouts work for your case, if you have something sophisticated and it doesn't, we also support custom templates. And so this is sort of the relief mechanism where if you really want to customize the look of something, if you want to use, for instance, some bootstrap dashboard template that you found, how can you embed Bokeh components in this template? And there's basically a few different little bits and pieces, and I'm going to go over this quickly, and we'll see a concrete example here in a few minutes. But there's a embed a macro to sort of add. This is a Jinja template. Bokeh provides this embed macro. There's up in the head of the document, there's a place where you need to supply the Bokeh.js resources, or actually the Bokeh will supply those if you put those template parameters there. And then you can embed Bokeh objects. So if you're familiar with Bokeh, there's this notion of a document, and you can add roots to a document. You might add a plot as a document root, or a layout as a document root, or you might have several different document roots. You can individually embed all of these document roots wherever you want. You've got some reactive bootstrap layout here, and inside this div you want to embed plot 1, and inside some other div you want to embed plot 2. This is the syntax you do to do it. Each of those, you can give a name to each of these plots, and then you just refer to them by name in the template, and it will put the right thing there. And then there's some boilerplate at the bottom. So that's sort of the roadmap to using that. And what's nice about that is that, again, you can use sort of a standard bootstrap template or whatever sort of layout system you want, and you can just target divs to put in Bokeh plots. And if you set the Bokeh plots to have a sizing mode that scales or stretches, then as the enclosing divs gets larger or smaller, Bokeh will react to that. A specific example of usage is the Dask UI. Has a diagnostic UI that Dask has, and it uses Bokeh extensively, and it also uses this templating capability. So who's familiar with Dask? A few folks? Okay, so Dask is a great library written by Matt Rocklin, several people work on it now, but initially created by Matt Rocklin. It's for distributed array computing. It's really fantastic. Let me actually see if I can pull up an example here. Let's see another quick live example. So I think actually, there we go, Dask examples. So all of these are available on my binder, so let me actually load this and see how long this takes. Might come back to it. So Dask is a pandas-like API for basically distributed computing. And so he has a lot of examples that are up here that you can look at. But if we take a look, I think, at the futures.ipynb, this is all running in a Jupyter lab on my binder. And so we can execute some of these cells for Dask. And we should see the actual task stream pop up here. There we go. And so if we actually execute some Dask code to do a computation, we'll start to see it update. We do more tasks. You can start to see the task graph sort of fill up. I'm going to execute a bunch of things. Yeah, so this lets you sort of see how the CPU utilization goes across. What are all the actual tasks that are running? And so Matt Rocklin used this, used Bokeh to provide this diagnostic UI because it makes diagnosing any issues with Dask usage much simpler, because you can really drill down into here was the increment task, the add task. You can see exactly what's going on. And you didn't have to write a web app to do this. You could do this all basically with Bokeh. And so actually this is the point where if Luke were here, he'd give you even more detail, because he actually wrote, I think, most of this along with Matt Rocklin. But anyway, that's a nice example. But of course, the main thing I wanted to mention with that is we can rearrange these. If we put this over here, then all of this stuff sort of reacts to that exactly as you'd expect, right? So that's because we're using this custom template embed capability. Okay. Back here. Go. Okay, so another thing that's worth mentioning is custom extensions. I'll mention this very briefly, just to say that Bokeh is extensible, right? So the core team will never be able to do every awesome idea that users have, right? There are a lot of great ideas that people have that, for whatever reason, we couldn't consider putting in the library itself, just because maybe we don't have the resources to maintain it, or maybe it's very too specialized. But now you can actually go ahead and extend Bokeh. You can create a JavaScript implementation that maybe either implements some cool widget or wraps some existing widget, and then you can use it just like any other Bokeh model, right? So here we're creating this custom widget. It's an instance of a slider with an extra custom text, and then I can use it. It's kind of hard to tell here. The slides are online on slide deck, by the way. But you can use this just like any other Bokeh widget, right? Like you would normally put a slider in a layout or a drop-down in a layout. You can use this custom widget just like any other built-in Bokeh widget. And so there's a lot of documentation for how to create those extensions on the docs page. But this is useful for things like wrapping different widgets. So this is the ion range slider, I think. Not built into Bokeh, but you can use it with Bokeh by writing an extension to do that. If you want to wrap some 3D library, there's no 3D capability built into Bokeh, but you can wrap 3D JS widgets and connect them to PyData tools by using Bokeh. Adding LaTeX labels. One of our longer term goals is to make this more built in, but right now if you want to use LaTeX labels, you can use a custom extension to do that. And the main idea is just that the community doesn't have to wait on us, right? There's a lot of room here for people to create a lot of interesting extensions, and I think if we can get to a point where we can make the extensions easily shareable between people, it'll really magnify their value across the community. Okay. Last little bit before some demos is just talking about Bokeh server applications. So I mentioned how Bokeh has a bunch of objects on the Python side. They're mirrored on the JavaScript side, mediated by this JSON representation, more or less. The role of the Bokeh server is to not only just take that Python representation and put it into the browser and just say, there it is, you're on your own, but to keep things synchronized automatically, right? So if I have an object that I update in Python, it automatically updates in the JavaScript side and can replot or whatever. And similarly, if I slide a slider on a Bokeh widget, then that information can come back to the Python code and run a regression, or update the data somehow. So every time you connect to a Bokeh server page, it runs this application code, creates this set of Python objects in the document. It communicates to the page using WebSockets and sends the JSON over, or for the case of NumPy arrays, it can also send the data over in a special binary format that's much more efficient. And then we get this canvas, HTML canvas output and DOM output as well. And so those are kept in sync. So for every user that hits a Bokeh server application, they get their own session with their own document and their own objects. It's not like a shared Google Docs editing kind of situation. But that's automatically keeping these things in sync is sort of the purpose of the Bokeh server. And we saw that when I did the OHLC demo, and I moved the slider, and the simulation changed, right? That's because I had a callback that responded to that slider change and could do new work and cause the output to update. And that's what the Bokeh server affords. Just as a quick example, we can define functions like this update function. We can attach it to a select. So if the value of the select widget changes, it can call that update function and change, for instance, the plot title. You could change the data source. You could change pretty much any aspect of the plot that you want to change. You can change it from one of these callbacks, and you can attach the callbacks to pretty much any property. There's also events that you can attach callbacks to, things like mouse move events, clicks, all kinds of different selection events, things like that. So there's a pretty rich system for attaching these kind of callbacks to do work in response to any kind of UI happening. There's also some document level callbacks as well if you want to have a periodic sort of push model where you update data. You can add a periodic callback that runs every 100 milliseconds and updates the data somehow. And then beyond that, it's also possible to have sort of more pull-like models. The Dask UI uses that, and you can sort of look at the Dask UI source code if you're kind of curious. It's kind of a more advanced case, but they actually add their own asynchronous handlers to Tornado, and so they can actually sort of have a pull model for data. Okay, let's see. So let's talk at an actual concrete example, sort of a full one, a small amount of code, but hopefully illustrative of these things. I want to build sort of a streaming or a Bokeh application that can do sort of face counting using OpenCV, right? So this is a nice example, I think, because it demonstrates that streaming API that I mentioned. It also shows connecting to PyData tools, right? So we're creating this Bokeh application that uses OpenCV to do this face detection. And then we're also using a custom layout for the nice look. So I'll briefly go over the code, what it looks like anyway, and then we'll check it out, we'll run it, and we'll see how it works. So here's the entire Python bits. And this is too small on the screen, I realize, so I'm definitely not going to spend a lot of time. But just to briefly point out things, there's some OpenCV code right up here, some imports, some OpenCV code. Here's our plots. We create an image plot to actually show the image. We create a rectangle glyph on that to highlight the faces we've detected. We create this time series plot at the bottom that actually shows a count of the number of faces as a step plot. here's our update function. So it creates a grayscale to pass to the cascade for detection. It creates an RGBA image to pass to the bokeh image glyph. And then it simply sets those data sources. So you can see the rectangle source .data equals this new data. The image source data, we're updating some values there. And in particular here at the bottom for the time series, we call .stream, and we call just the new values. And so that very efficiently updates that time series plot. Last thing is we add these roots. I mentioned document roots, so I say curdoc.addRoot for the image plot, curdoc.addRoot for the time series plot, which I've given some names over there. And then I can refer to those in the template. So this is the entire template. Again, hard to see on the screen. Here's that part I mentioned where we have the Bokeh.js resources. Here is just some content you'll see on the side, just lorem ipsum filler content. Here's that part where I embed the roots. So I embed roots.image and roots.ts, right, for time series, and those will show up. And so let's actually give this a go and see how that goes. Go to this right here. Should have a nice camera. Oh, I actually hit enter. We'll wait for that to start up. But, there we go, right? So I've got my little camera here. It's doing a face detection, frontal face detection. You can see that it's showing, one or two, depending on what it does, faces here. I'm going to just point around. I've never seen it work on a crowd. We'll see how well it works. OK. So we can see there's more faces there. That's pretty cool. Luke warned me that that would work pretty well, but I hadn't actually ever tested it on a crowd. So thank you guys for having obliging faces, which actually is a good point to consider. I don't usually, lecture on things, but I will say briefly, I think this stuff is super cool, right? I mean, in terms of like technology, but I don't know. At the risk of belaboring a point, I would say be mindful of what you're putting all of these wonderful tools, and what uses you're putting them to. For instance, this face detection, I don't know much about this HAR cascade at all. Are there faces that recognizes? Are there faces it's not good at recognizing? What implicit biases are built into it? So just, these are really powerful tools. We've all been, been given by the open source community, so let's try to put them to good uses and do good things with them. Is my only 2 cents there. Okay, let's see. So that was the live demo. We already did that. Some final thoughts, and then we'll take some questions. I think we're actually pretty good on time. First off, there's a list of resources here. Obviously not so good on the screen here, but if you go to that speaker deck, if you go to my speaker deck, Bryan V, this presentation is available, a dash of Bokeh, and it has the links, all of these here. There's things like GitHub if you want to make issues or you want to get involved in developing. The documentation page, bokeh.pydata.org/en/latest, is all the documentation. There's a user's guide, there's a reference guide, there's a developer guide to get started building Bokeh and getting to work on it. Live tutorials, if you just go to GitHub, there's a link to this. We have all of our tutorial notebooks on my binder, so you can go actually play around with them, live working notebooks and experiment with Bokeh. The mailing list we use is pretty active. Stack Overflow is a great place to ask questions about Bokeh 2 for usage or other kinds of questions. And of course, we have a Gitter chat channel. It's a great place to also come and talk to other users or some of the core developers. Okay. Last call to action. Install Bokeh, check it out. It's liberally licensed, BSD license, including the server. GitHub.com, Bokeh/Bokeh. Hopefully still working. It seemed like GitHub had some issues this morning, if anyone else noticed. Fun night for everyone there, I'm sure. Also, if you can, if you're able, you or your organization could consider donating to Bokeh via NumFOCUS, right? So last year, Bokeh became a NumFOCUS fiscally sponsored project. Really very happy about that. That's always been the long-term goal. Bokeh's been forced to have a stream of sort of institutional support, both through the original DARPA XData grant that we got and then through Anaconda. But as time goes on, we're going to need to sort of find ways to push Bokeh a bit more into the community, and this NumFOCUS step was a really great first step. So certainly if you have the ability to help contribute to open source software, or your organization does, you can do that through NumFOCUS. And NumFOCUS is a great organization, that's why we're all here today. Last thing is to engage companies for work. So we're getting to the point where people are starting to do work around Bokeh, which is again amazing to me. People that want to do integration work or build up more sophisticated things. And so I think that's really cool and really awesome. I know a few folks that are interested in doing that sort of thing and companies that are. So if you're interested in any kind of commercial engagements, feel free to reach out to me or bokehplots@gmail.com, and we can try to put you in touch with the right folks, because that's always very good. That kind of feedback from actual real users and use cases is probably the best stone to sharpen the tool on, right? Sometimes I feel like I'm a tinkerer and I develop this library, but I'm not actually a user. And so maybe I missed some important use cases. And so getting that feedback is a very valuable loop for us to sort of close things. OK, so that is pretty much all I have for the presentation. I think we have about 10 minutes now, which actually worked out pretty well. I shouldn't act surprised, I guess. And so we can take some questions. And
raise your hand, I'll bring you the mic.
And yeah, and we have a microphone. So if you have questions, just raise your hand. And
thank you for this great presentation. My question is, obviously we can see that these dashboards would be very useful internally in different companies, but I was wondering if you have any use cases or companies have been using these dashboards to external users, and if you can share with us these different use cases. Thank you.
That's a great question. The perennial or a perennial problem in open source is that if things work, that's great, people use them, and they don't necessarily call home and tell you about them. We're trying to start doing a user survey every year where we can try to solicit some of this information back. I don't have any specific examples I can point you to. I do know folks have done some work to, for instance, I think there was just a recent thing we tweeted out about someone put together a nice blog post about how to, for instance, host a Bokeh app on it's like DigitalOcean or there's some other system like that, and sort of start to finish instructions for doing that. And so I can't point you to anything specific, unfortunately. When there are problems, we get all the issues on GitHub, and we get feature requests. But when things are working, people just use it, and a lot of stuff is internal as well. I definitely know of folks that are using it internally for, dashboards and things behind, behind corporate networks. But I can't point to anything specifically public at the moment. I mean, I see things from time to time, like, oh, it's Bokeh, it's great, but no one's made it like a big announcement in terms of like a public-facing one that I know of. So, good question.
Hi, thank you for the tool. It's really awesome. How do you see yourself in relation to D3? Is there any overlap, or is there? I get a lot of corporate clients who are like, oh, they're very interested in D3, and I can point out other libraries like this, but they're all focused on D3. So
yeah, absolutely.
They've heard it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the relationship between Bokeh and D3? And the short answer is that there's not one. So Bokeh is not built on D3, for instance. That's a question that's come up. So Bokeh draws currently on HTML canvas directly. It's a raster canvas for drawing. We have some WebGL capability, and we're interested in expanding that in the future. That's one of our areas of work tasks that we'd like to work on. The main thing I would say is that what Bokeh gives you that D3 doesn't is that it lets you connect all of those PyData tools that I talked about directly to these visualizations without having to write the D3 or the HTML code, right, necessarily. D3 is a fantastic tool, and it lets you make really wonderful visualizations. It's kind of an artisanal tool. I think there's like a failed D3 experiments.tumblr.com or something, because it requires a little bit of work. And don't get me wrong, some things in Bokeh require a little work too. It's just a matter of where have the different tools optimized for. And so if you've got people up and running and productive using Pandas and scikit-learn and all of these tools already, and they want to get them up and running as fast as possible, I would say Bokeh is going to be faster than saying, pointing them at the D3 docs and say, okay, make a website and figure out how to serve the data and figure out how to get it into the page and then figure out how to use D3 to render it. If you've already got people working in that sphere and in front-end dev, then D3 is a great tool. But if you have people that don't want to have to climb another learning curve, Bokeh is a fantastic way to get them up and running as quick as possible. So, good question, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, a couple over here.
Similar to the last question, is there any known ways or open source examples of integrating Bokeh widgets or pages into existing, say, React apps or other front-end frameworks?
So I mean, the docs I think have some examples of that kind of thing. I can't point to any specific use cases. We have a variety of different ways to embed, and so you can embed things into divs. And if you make the Bokeh content reactive, then the div responds. The Bokeh plot will get bigger or smaller. If you look actually at the app here, I didn't actually show off the responsive part. Let me run this again. So this is a bootstrap one, but I think it'd be pretty similar for React. If you run this, if I make this smaller, then all of a sudden, this updates, right? So I've got now, that works because this is embedded in a bootstrap layout. I think the story is pretty much the same for React. I'm actually not a front-end dev expert, and I've never really used React myself. But I think it's sort of the same story, is that you can embed these Bokeh components that have a sizing mode that allows them to scale inside whatever content you want. And then so this allows us to not have to try to own the layout problem. You can use React or you can use Bootstrap or whatever you want. But if you have specific questions, I would say the mailing list is a great place, or Stack Overflow, and we can try to hash out the specifics. But I don't foresee any problems with using Bokeh with React. So, good. Other questions?
Hi, I want to know more about how active is currently in development right now, and how often do you plan to release your minor version?
Yeah, good question. So about the activity development. So right now there's sort of 1.5 people working, I'd say, on Bokeh pretty regularly. I think that the institutional funding for Bokeh is going to taper off here. Sort of Anaconda is focusing on some different priorities. And so I think, that, as I mentioned, it's a great time to get involved trying to find other ways to support people. Obviously, I'm personally attached to Bokeh as a project that I really believe in and want to move forward. So the question is, what will that be? Right now, the development is still very active. We have reached this sort of plateau, this sort of 1.0 plateau, and that's not to indicate that we're done. There's still plenty of bugs and some features to implement. But it does indicate that we've reached, I think, a plateau of stability for like the API. And so I think that gives us some breathing room, right? And I'd like to have much faster cadence on like micro point releases, and then have like the 1.1 release maybe every few months, something like that. I can't commit to anything specific because that's contingent on sort of funding avenues and things like that. But that's my suggestion would be maybe a point release every couple, 3 or 4 times a year, and then a micro point release a little bit more often, which are much smaller targeted type releases. So, yep. Other questions? Yeah, question. Oh, we'll go in the middle too. Let's go.
So thank you for your talk. A lot of these questions have been technical. Mine is going to be more like squishy, philosophical.
Okay.
But when you said I'm a tinkerer,
yeah.
I'm just sort of curious, like, what do you mean by that in this context? Sort of tell me about that identity and how it's kind of informing this work.
I like taking things apart and putting them together, but I'm not like a data scientist, for instance, and I would never claim to be a data scientist. So people who are using Bokeh for data science are doing work that I'm not especially familiar with. And so a lot of times requirements for tools like these are really, from a broad stroke, it's like, oh, I've worked on visualization tools before, and so I have some idea and familiarity with that space and what's useful. But when you get down to it, there's always little things that can make a big difference. And sometimes, if you're not actually familiar with the use cases, knowing what little things make the most difference, right, is the thing that you miss, right? And so I'm not using Bokeh day to day to like do work. I'm working on Bokeh day to day. But that's different than like using Bokeh and running into like, hey, here's a rough edge that I just didn't know about because I'm not actually doing daily data science work with it or daily science work with it. And so that's sort of what I'm getting at is that, when you do work with something day to day, you get very familiar with like all the little corners and little rough edges. And maybe I miss those because I'm not doing that kind of work. And so that's where I say it's very valuable to get this feedback loop from users. New user perspective is also very incredibly valuable. If someone comes to Bokeh for the first time and can't figure anything out, that's important for us to know. Or if they can't figure some specific thing out, maybe we can make it better, right? But that's, I'm so far in the forest and in the trees right now that, I don't necessarily see those things. So, yeah. Good question, thank you. Other questions? Back over here, cool. All the questions are on this side of the room.
My question is about the Bokeh
Yep.
And Shiny.
Yep.
So is Bokeh the same, or in terms of efficiency and the ease of use, similar to Bokeh? And how would you, I don't know if you've used or have seen Shiny before. How would you compare these two together?
Yeah, I've definitely seen Shiny, and I would compare the Python Bokeh server fairly directly with Shiny, right? In terms of being able to connect, in the case of Shiny, R tools directly to front-end visualizations very easily with a minimum of sort of web tech coding. And the Bokeh server lets you do that sort of for the Python side. Bokeh currently lets you create standalone type documents from Bokeh. And by that I mean, you can have lots of interactions. You can have panning and zooming, linked selections. You can have custom JS tools. You can have custom JS actions for selections. You can have a very interactive page, but it's not connected to any server. And so Bokeh can generate those kind of plots today. I think Ryan's prepping another release soon. It's been a little bit of a while. He got kind of busy, but I think he's prepping a new release to update Bokeh to a much more recent version, hopefully here in the very near future. But he's got a really nice page put together on, if you go to his GitHub, you can sort of see what it can already do. And depending on what you're doing, if you're already using Bokeh with Python, I think it's maybe a nice mix and match, right? Because you can embed, you could imagine embedding things from R or from Python very easily in the same page. And I think that's where the value lies, and also have them look and appear similar. So, cool.
Okay, we're out of time.
We're out of time, okay.
Thank you again, Bryan.
Thank you.
Let's give him a